Yay Networks.
Welcome to Greg Louganis is Alive, the podcast that challenges what you think you know. I'm your host, Greg Louganis, and yes, I'm alive, and joined by my good friend and manager, Beth Sinman.
Hello, hello. I don't think I'm ever going to get tired of hearing you say, and yes, I'm alive.
Right? Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's fabulous. So my pleasure to be here as always. And I'm wondering what is on the agenda today.
Today, I'm talking about a topic I am intimately familiar with, and that is mental health.
I'm really glad you're talking about this. And I know, obviously, that you talk about this in other forums, but this, I don't think can get enough attention. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's people I think most of us have probably struggled with mental health to some degree or another, whether it was like ourselves having an experience, or a family member or a friend. But, I think too that it's enlightening that people understand, because I think there's maybe a misconception that public personas, don't go through these things. And, personally, I, for one, applaud you for sharing.
It's true. Depression can feel very isolating, and we try to put a happy face on for others, which isolates you even more. And if no one's being open about it, how are you able to connect with others going through similar situations and find the support that you need?
Yeah. You're exactly right. There is a story that I've heard you tell before that I really would love for you to share with your listeners, because it just blows my mind, like how when you won a silver medal at just 16 years old, it didn't land with you the same way it landed for like the rest of the country. Like every American was like, wow, yay, that's so cool. But that's not what's happening for you.
It was so confusing for me because at that time, I was diving with Dr. Sammy Lee. He won 2 gold medals, 48 and 52. He coached Bobby Webster from the U.S., who won 2 gold medals, 60, 64. And this is men's platform diving. And so Klaus DiBiase in 1976 was going for his 3rd Olympic gold medal, which would break Dr. Sammy Lee's record. So my sole purpose on this planet at age 16 was to prevent Klaus from winning that gold medal.
It's heavy.
And I failed. So I didn't understand. Everybody's celebrating me and, for getting a silver medal. And I felt like a failure because I went there to win. I didn't go there to take second. And I let my coach down. His record was broken. And it was my responsibility at 16 to prevent that from happening. And, the highest rate of suicide amongst Olympians is Olympic silver medalists. And it kind of makes sense if you think about it, because if you are a gold medalist, then, you did what you were supposed to do. If you're a bronze medalist, chances are through the competition, you're just grateful to have something to bring home.
Hallelujah.
Yeah. And then silver medalists, you're just so close and, just shy of that, of that elusive gold medal. And the impact that it has, I mean, it hangs over you. So that was, I tried to commit suicide after that because I just didn't understand. I felt like the world would be a better place without me, that I was just a waste of space.
So with that said, Greg Louganis is still alive.
Greg Louganis is still alive. And also to shine more light on today's topic, I've invited Gabe Howard to join me in discussing his journey with bipolar disorder. Gabe is an award-winning podcast host, author, and sought-after speaker. But according to him, he wouldn't be any of those things today if he hadn't been committed to a psychiatric hospital and diagnosed with bipolar disorder back in 2003. Gabe hosts the Inside Mental Health podcast, which has received accolades from the National Alliance on Mental Illness, as well as other mental health organizations. Quoted and interviewed often in major media outlets. He's the author of Mental Illness is an Asshole and Other Observations. So I'm really looking forward to that conversation with Gabe.
Love that.
Yeah. So we'll be right back to talk with Gabe after this break. So, Gabe.
Greg.
Welcome to the show. Oh my gosh. Greg Louganis is alive. Mental health is, oh my God. I love the title of your book, Mental Illness is an Asshole. And it truly is. It really is. Because it's just like, gosh, I remember, it was interesting because I was seeing an interview, when you were sharing with somebody your experience, like when I was 12, I went to my mom and I said, I can understand how a person can die of sadness. I didn't see suicide like a lot of people see, that it's selfish, that it's I didn't see it that way.
Yeah, me neither.
I just saw people being either in so much pain emotionally or sad that they could die of sadness.
For me, it was really just normal. I always felt this way. So
Yeah.
I didn't see it as positive or negative. I just thought it was one of the options, like choosing between,
Right.
pizza or spaghetti. There wasn't a value for me. It was just some people like spaghetti, some people like pizza, and yet other people are vegans or vegetarians, right? We're all allowed to choose what we want. And this is one of the choices that's perfectly acceptable. And that's how it was in my brain.
Yeah. I view it, from it's an option.
Yeah. It's a bad option. I feel the need to jump in and say that it's not a great option.
It's not a great option because it's permanent, right?
Right.
That's just it. It's like a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
Exactly. And it also, I think, it shines a giant light on the fact that it is a problem and that there was no help available. And there's a million reasons that no help is available, from people not understanding to people not knowing what to do and everything in between. But make no mistake, when a suicide happens, something went very, very wrong. And we always like to put that very, very wrong on the person who's dead. And I'm just like, there's so much that went wrong, and we're only factoring in one small part, which means we're never going to get out of this cycle because things are very slow to change.
Right. Yeah. It's like what, you see so often in memes. It's like you never know what other people are battling, right. And you really don't. You don't know what other people are being challenged with. And
people are afraid to speak up for just... it's scary out there, Greg, and I'm speaking somewhat to the choir here, but it's just, there's this idea that if I share it, you could reject me. And I already feel rejected, right. But at least I feel rejected superficially because right now you don't know me. So if I share it, right. Now you know me and you reject me, that's even worse. See, right now I could just assume that you were ignorant, right? But if I tell you, and then you reject me, well, now you're well informed. What do I do with that?
What do you do with that?
Most people, unfortunately, have very serious mental health issues. They have trauma. They die by suicide. They don't get the help that they needed. And most specifically, they don't tell anyone else. And see, that's where it's really, really super scary, I think, because it is certainly possible that I'm going to pick on you, Greg, just because you happen to be in here. I tell Greg and Greg rejects me, right? That's one person. There's hundreds of millions of people out there. It's just bad luck that the person I told first rejected me, but that sets the tone. I have decided that now everyone will, which means I can't get to that person that would have accepted me, helped me, guided me, mentored me, or frankly, just hugged me, because I assume that they're all you now. And it's no shock that we're seeing this in disproportionate numbers in like LGBTQ youth, because they tell one person and that person reject, and then they don't get out to the rest of the world. Now we're doing better. Doing better is kind of one of those, we're doing better. Listen, let's say that you need $10,000 or you're going to be evicted from your home, right? And you have $3,000, right? You're doing better, right? And then you have $4,000. You're doing better, but the outcome's the same. You're going to be evicted from your home. And that's sort of how I feel about this doing better, right? Like, but the outcomes are the same. I want to do better differently.
Right. You want to do better to alleviate it, not patch it.
Right. I want to solve it. I want to have robust plans that work day after day, month after month, year after year. Not like, hey, we did good this summer. I don't want to do good this summer.
Right. How do you practice self-care for yourself?
So the big thing for me is like brutal honesty, and I try to be very, very, very open and aware. And as you alluded to, the name of my book is Mental Illness as an Asshole, and I named it that for a variety of reasons, but one of the biggest ones is because, well, just frankly, mental illness is an asshole. And for me in my life, I know what assholes are doing. Right. I keep track of assholes. I know the people who are out there trying to hurt me because I don't want to give them the opportunity to hurt me again. And so often we look at it, we take mental health, mental illness. I live with bipolar disorder, and we sort of try to push those things down, forget about them. We don't want to dwell on them. That's the phrase that I always hear. I don't want to dwell on my mental illness. And I'm like, that's great. So you're not watching the asshole, and now the asshole can come after you. We're always on guard for assholes. So I just moved mental illness into the asshole category, and now I watch out for them. And believe it or not, that is self-care for me because it's empowering. See, mental illness isn't following me around trying to hurt me. I'm watching it. And again, I know you're like, dude, what does that have to do with self-care? Like, I thought you were going to say like mindfulness or meditation or yoga. I'm like, no. Taking control is self-care.
Right.
Can't believe it just banged my mic.
I agree 100%. I'm totally on that. I'm with you on that because, you brought up, coming out as a gay man, going to the wrong person and being rejected and, just that feeling and sensation. And it is, we make that assumption. We make the assumption that everybody is like that.
And it's an example that I use because I think people are more understanding of it now. But this plays out in so many other ways. For example, I myself am straight, so I never came out. But I came from a very stereotypical blue-collar family. My dad's a truck driver, and he believes that every problem that befalls a man can be, you just rub mud on it and you soldier through. It's toxic masculinity in the 80s to its absolute finest. And when I told people, the people around me, I cry a lot. They're like, man up. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm never going to tell anybody I cry ever again. So here I am constantly crying. I'm constantly feeling sad. I can't, but I'm like, no, I have to be a man. So I never told anybody. Well, nobody, the people that I told, the one or two people that I told just gave me the stereotypical be a man advice. So I never told anybody again. So it wasn't until I ended up in a psychiatric hospital that I ever got any help for a mental health condition that was prominent and plagued me since birth. It's it's unfortunate. And now my family, of course, feels horrible. My dad's like, I can't believe I did that to you. And I'm like, well, mental illness is complicated and difficult. And I know you didn't mean to. You did what you thought was best. But it turns out that what you thought was best was dangerous. It was really dangerous. And you're lucky you're not one of those parents that's, I loved my son. He was so awesome. And then he died. And they know this. Like, and that's what I mean by this, like, real self-talk that you really, really have to have with yourself and your family members. You really can't tiptoe around it. I think that's a protective factor for me and a lot of people, is just, you know what, we're just going to admit that we screwed up. Let's admit that we screwed up and not do it again. It's got to be incredibly tough. And I know how tough it is when the whole world's not watching, right? I know your audience is going to be shocked, but I am not an Olympic gold medalist. We probably would have mentioned that at the top of the show if I had an Olympic gold medal. The world is not really watching Gabe do anything, but there's members of my family who are, my friend group. I have a small little following of community people who are like, oh, Gabe didn't get that podcast out, that article out, and they're disappointed, and I feel bad about it. So I can only imagine the pressure, how that just ramps up. Right. First, people are afraid to disappoint their family and friends. Then they're disappointed to, their communities. Then they're afraid of disappointing maybe a small following. And now you're worried about disappointing America. So I imagine that had to suck for you.
Yeah. And the thing is, I think that I was pretty clear pretty early on in my diving career, competing on the world stage and all. I think I was pretty clear that really the only ones that I was representing was myself and my coach and, my parents, people who were close to me. Because the other exterior people, the America, they weren't real to me. Their voices, it's noise, because I could do well and get their praise. I could mess up and I'd fall out of favor. So I knew that was all very temporary.
I think that's an incredibly mentally healthy stance to take, that it's all very temporary. I think a lot of people, and when I say a lot of people, I don't mean all the other Olympic gold medalists, just a lot of people, right? Just people doing things, this idea of temporary. We tend not to see this. We tend to think that whatever we are doing now is the most important thing in the world, and that it's either going to stay great or get better. We don't have a lot of emotional understanding that things can, in fact, and most likely will, get worse. The world ebbs and flows, but we're sort of trained from kids that everything just gets better, like it's an escalator where it just keeps improving, and then you die, I guess. But I think that we need to have a better understanding that sometimes you can do everything right and bad shit happens. And we don't have a good understanding of that. So it catches us off guard every time.
Yeah, because like for me lately, what I've been going through is I was like, okay, we're starting this podcast, or we're doing this biopic, and we've started. This is years ago, and we start, and it's like, oh God, is this going to actually happen? So you have so many false starts, it starts tearing away at your self-esteem, your confidence, all of that stuff. So it really is, there's challenges around every corner.
Well, you mentioned the name of the show is Greg Louganis is Alive. And you said that one of the top trending Google searches was, is Greg Louganis still alive? What is it? From an emotional standpoint, what's it feel like?
I get messages in my message box. Hey, I have a bet with a friend of mine. Are you dead?
Wow. You should reply yes.
And I do. I respond, yes. Will you let me, rest in peace, please? But no, because in '88 I was diagnosed HIV positive. Most people make that assumption. If I'm not in the public's eye, then they make the assumption, oh, he must be dead. And it doesn't bother me. It really doesn't bother me. But it was funny because I was working with the United States Olympian and Paralympian Association, and Karin Davies said, oh, you've got to address this. Everybody thinks you're dead. I said, oh, Karin, I go through this like every 6 months. So, but it's, that's a part of it. That's a part of, I guess, fame, or at least mine, and then assumptions that people make, connections that they make. Oh, he was HIV positive in '88. He can't be still around. So, and it's fun, fun to play with. It's like what you were saying, just really not taking myself too seriously.
I remember when you were on my podcast, the Inside Mental Health podcast, the question that I asked you is, hey, they made fun of you on Family Guy. Does that offend you? And I loved your answer, because it's like, no, are you kidding? I love it. I got to be on Family Guy. It sticks in my mind a little bit, because I expected you to answer differently. I thought you were going to say, I thought you were going to say, it kind of sucks to be made fun of on national television, because
oh no, I love it.
That's what you said.
I love it. When somebody, oh gosh, I think it was a baseball game, and I don't know, they dove and slid into home or something, and they say, oh, I did a Louganis over the home plate or something like that. It's like, oh my God, because they thought of me. It's like, what? I don't think people are going to think of me, like that. Or it could be, oh, somebody, slammed their head into something, and it's like, oh, I did a Louganis. It's like, I think it's hysterical.
It's such an incredibly mentally healthy way to be, and a great reframing of what you could take as a negative. And in fact, it shows you, I don't want to say I assumed it, because I did ask the question, but if I would have put money on it, I would have been like, it's got to bother him, right? It's got to bother you to be made fun of on Family Guy. But you pointed out to me that I've never been made fun of on Family Guy. And now, after you said that, like, my whole goal in life now is just to be made fun of on national television. Like, you switched it for me just like that by being so open. And what a great and mentally healthy way to look at things. And I think that's the real genesis of why we need to have more conversations, because, like you said, people have these assumptions, and then they make decisions based on these assumptions, and these decisions don't serve them. And if we can get rid of those assumptions, maybe it's just a maybe, that's all we can do is a maybe people will make better decisions, and will make new and different mistakes.
So what's your advice to somebody who might be struggling?
The first thing that I want to let people know who might be struggling is it is most likely temporary if you ask for help. Reach out to the text hotline, call the suicide hotline, go to a support group, keep talking to people. I love analogies. I'm sort of known for them. And, I always say, if you're drowning and you yell to somebody to save you because you're drowning, and that person, for whatever reason, just keeps walking, and the next person comes along, you yell at them too. People who are, need 911 will yell at everybody they can find to call 911. If the first person, for whatever reason, doesn't hear them, rejects them, doesn't do it, they keep yelling. So we have this basic understanding in physical health, and it needs to carry over to mental health. If you don't get what you need from the first person, ask the second person, and just keep doing it. The next thing that I want people to know is that it often needs medical intervention. Now, medical intervention doesn't mean medicated, right? It could be, and it doesn't even necessarily mean therapy. It just needs some sort of structured input. And I say this because so many people think that they're supposed to be able to handle it on their own. Like, no, I can handle it. I got to be a man and handle it, or I got to be tough and handle it. Or, I hear women say, look, I got 4 kids at home. I don't have time for this. If I can raise these kids, I can handle this. I feel sad. I'm like, no, it's actually the opposite. You're so busy, and you've worn yourself so thin being responsible for so many people that you've stopped putting the effort into yourself, and those cracks are showing. And what it was, the cobbler's kids don't have shoes. The plumber's house has leaky faucets, because you're putting all of your attention on other people. You're not putting that intention onto yourself. And now you have, no shoes and leaky plumbing. I want people to understand that, because so many people believe that any sort of acknowledgement means that they are bad, negative, weak, some sort of pejorative. And that's so incredibly sad to me, because while we certainly need to do more work to make sure that help is more available, help is available. I don't want to fall down a rabbit hole in explaining the holes in the mental health safety net in this country because they're vast, but it does start with you being willing to accept help, looking for help, making those phone calls and asking those people. And I wish that more people would do that, because we hear about so many people suffering in silence. And in many ways that's the worst for me, because I think, wow, we couldn't even give them the basic strength to be able to ask for help. We really, as a society, have failed when someone is suffering and they don't believe they can ask for help.
Now, is medication a part of your wellness? Is that a part of your self-care?
Yeah, for me personally, I live with bipolar disorder. I have bipolar disorder type 1 with psychotic features. So I have delusions, but the medication clears that up. I know that's a funny way to put it, but when I'm medicated, it takes my extreme emotions that are bipolar disorder is known for, godlike mania, thinking I'm literally the king of the world. I think that I'm the Louganis of the world. All the way down to suicidal depression. Like when I'm unmedicated, that's my emotional range. Obviously impossible to manage. On top of that, I have delusions where I think that people are following me or that things are happening that are not happening. The medication puts that into a controllable range. It alleviates, some of the paranoia, some of the anxiety, all of the delusions, and takes me from going from godlike mania to, literal garbage into a more manageable emotional range. And medication works incredible for me. I will say, you got to get the right medications. I think that's one of the reasons that medication gets such a bad rap, because so many people have been prescribed the wrong medications, or it took 4 years for me to find the right combination. Now, that doesn't mean that I was at the same place for the entire 4 years, but I'd be prescribed a medication and maybe it would clear up one thing, but then it would cause sexual side effects. Well, that's not a good deal. So maybe then I'd get another medication that would clear up the sexual side effects, but then I thought that I was a god. Okay, well, that's not a good deal. You can't get rid of the depression, but only have mania, and on and on and on. So it takes some time to find the right medications. And I think that people don't understand that. They think it's like having a headache, right? Where you have the headache, you take the medication, the headache magically goes away. And it takes weeks for medication to become effective. So even if it's the right one, it takes weeks before it works. And if it's the wrong one or the wrong dosage, or you need multiple medications like I do, it just takes a long time. But the right medications are key.
I think, because right after I finished interviewing with Eric Marcus for Breaking the Surface, I was in therapy and all that, and I was dealing with depression. And to get working on the depression that I was experiencing, the medications helped. But then it got to a point where, like you said, one medication has this side effect, and so to transact that, I was on a plethora of medications. I think the difficult thing for me was I wasn't communicating well of what I was experiencing.
There's so many people that they're on medication and they lie because they're embarrassed, and different genders do it for different reasons. Like the sexual side effects I always bring up because it's the number one reason that people stop taking their medication, but they make it worse on themselves. So, the average onset of serious and persistent mental illness is 16 to 24. So everybody pretend that you're between the ages of 16 and 24. So you can be a young woman or you can be a young man, but you're probably unmarried. You're probably still on your parents' health insurance. Maybe you even still live with your parents, but you're the ages of 16 to 24, and you have a sexual side effect and you don't like it because you want to have sex. Now, in this country, for some reason, sex is everywhere, but nobody wants to talk about it. So you take the medication, your libido goes away, and you're like, I'm not going to have that. So you stop taking the medicine, but then you go to your appointment and the doctor's like, hey, you taking those meds? Yup, sure am. So now everything that happens past that is because your doctor is making decisions based on a medication that you stopped taking 3 weeks ago, and it just compounds the situation. So then you get another medication and you're like, well, maybe I'll get better now. Yeah, but see, it's already messed up. And then in people's minds, like, well, I tried 4 medications and none of it worked. yeah, you really didn't try 4 medications because I hate to say lied because it sounds so judgy, but you misinformed the doctor, and then the doctor made decisions that didn't work for you.
I'll admit I lied.
It's not uncommon.
I lied when, it was like, because I was embarrassed, like you said, it's like, yeah, but I just wanted to feel better.
I do often wonder, is there anybody out there that like sent me a nasty gram and then 6 months later, a year later, 2 years later, however long, like, oh, I feel bad about that. And I'd venture to guess they're just, I've been doing this for so long. There has to be somebody out there who feels that way. But you've done this on a much bigger stage. Has anybody criticized you that years later came back and they're like, you know what? I was an asshole. I shouldn't have done that.
There was this young man. I was one of the grand marshals for the Gay Pride Parade in New York. I think it was in 95 or something. And I was on the float and yells out to me, he said, "Well, it's about time you came out," really angry. And, my book had just, hit the bookstores and all. And I just smiled and said, "Well, thank you." And just didn't think about it. I mean, it was memorable. It made an impression. It definitely made an impression. But that was his perspective, and that's where he came from. And then a couple years go by, and I do a speaking engagement in New York. And this young man came up to me, and I think he handed me a teddy bear or something. And he said, "I am so sorry that I yelled at you at the Gay Pride Parade. I had no idea what you'd been through." Because then that was after he read my book.
That's amazing. What'd you say to him?
I just gave him a hug. I told him it's okay. I forgave you. As soon as those words left your mouth, I forgave you. Because people say things just on impulse, and oftentimes, it's not, it's not thought through.
Exactly.
And once they have more information, then they can see, I was an asshole, or, that was inappropriate, or whatever that is. But, I mean, and the poor kid, I mean, he obviously, was beating himself up, for a long time, a lot longer than I was beating myself up for it.
I think about stories like this a lot, and I really wish that more people were willing to come back and just say anything. I don't even want to say apologize. I don't even want to elevate it to that high of a thing. Just like, hey, 10 years ago I was going through some shit and I think I took it out on you. Like, that's it. Just like, that's it. It's like, hey, thanks for letting me know. I do wish more people would do that. Not to me or you, just in general. Like, I mean, to me and you too, but just like in their whole society. Like, hey, remember 2 years ago when I yelled at you at Christmas, Mom? Yeah, I shouldn't have done that. That's it. Like, and then just move along. I think there's a lot of moms that would love to hear that.
Yeah. I mean, and sometimes it's just a feeling. It's just a feeling that you might have. Maybe, you had some, and you may not even know what the row was about, what the disagreement was about. And then, but that there was a feeling there, and then just addressing that feeling and say, you know what, I have this odd feeling when I see you, and obviously something went, awry, and, I'm sorry for any part of my, I'm sorry for any discomfort that I may have caused you, or, but, it's just acknowledging your part in it, and just saying, yeah, because you a grudge, and resentments go two ways. So it's not just usually one person.
So many people believe that that shows weakness, or it opens up a can of worms. Or my personal favorite phrase is, well, that's history. I don't look in the past. And I'm just, none of those things are true. I would be willing to say that there's nobody who says, oh, I don't live in the past, I live in the present. I'm like, yeah, that's not true. I would say that you live in the past a significant portion of time. You just are either one, lying about it, or two, and the most probable one, unaware of it. We all live in the past.
Right.
All of our triggers, all of our angers, all of our resentments, all of our feelings were all formed behind us. And to say, I don't live in the past, well, then why do you get so mad at certain things? Why do you turn up certain songs? Those are all things that happened behind us. So I think we all spend much more time living in the past than many of us care to admit.
I think it's important to, you can acknowledge it and learn from it, and that's how you not make those mistakes that you've made in the past, to kind of stay true to. And in recovery, we call it a living amends. So you're living your amends, but it's not to say that negates anything you did in the past. That's a part of who we are.
It is. It made us. It's the road that got us here. And to say I don't care about the road that got me here is, I think it's a bold statement. And I think many people who have this I don't live in the past mentality, I don't think they're aware with the phrase, pay attention to where you came from, or, they don't know what it means. Look, I get the idea of not dwelling on the mistakes that you made. And I get the idea of, when somebody wants to pummel you over the head over and over and over again with a mistake that you made 15 years ago. I get that. I think it's important that we bring that up. Before I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, I made a lot of mistakes and I hurt a lot of people. And I was diagnosed 20 years ago, and I've made as much amends and owned my mistakes, and I've done everything that I can. And every now and again, family members or friends that I knew back then, they're just, they're still upset about something I did when I was 21, and I'm 46 now. And there is this piece of me that wants to lash out at them and be like, really? You're judging me for something that I did 25 years ago? Really? You never made a mistake when you were 21? And don't get me wrong, I want to do it. And sometimes I do. I'm not a perfect person. But I understand not wanting to live in the past, in that if somebody's shown you a better version of themselves for a significant period of time and you're still bringing up that mistake that they made, I get that. But I think then that's the entry point. That's what you should point out. Maybe ask politely, hey, you've brought up that thing that I did to you 25 years ago a few times. I just want to talk to you about it because clearly it's still on your mind. What can I do at 46 to make amends for that thing that I did at 21, or to help you so that I can understand, do you feel that I'm still doing it? I think there is probably an interesting conversation to be had there if you are emotionally and mentally well enough to have it. And that's a difficult thing to do as well. These are not easy suggestions.
No. And the thing is, obviously it made an impression or it wouldn't have come up. And so they're holding on to a piece of that. And so that's how I envision how healing happens. Is having that heart to heart and say, okay, what was it? What were you feeling? What did I miss? And not that it's going to reverse anything, but it might be for the other person to be heard, that they just wanted to be heard and seen. Because that's, I think, what we're trying to do is be heard and seen.
I like what you said about it's not going to reverse anything. I'm not sure that it should. And some of the things that I did before I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and the people that I hurt, I wish that I could forget them. I wish that I could erase them from my brain. I do, because I feel terrible about them. Even all these years later, even after I've been forgiven by most of the people that I hurt, as many as humanly possible. But the advantage of not forgetting is, every now and again, stupid things pop in my head. Like, well, maybe I don't need this much medication. Maybe I don't need to go to therapy this week. Maybe I could just have a drink of alcohol as a toast, right? They say that it's going to interfere with my meds, but I bet I could have one. Maybe I don't need to worry about diet and exercise as much. Maybe I can stay up all night. And then I remember. It just kind of nestles up there right alongside. It's like, yeah, you can do that. Then you can yell at your mom again. And then I'm like, yeah, you know what? Never mind. I think we're good. I think I'm just going to stick right here. I like what I have going now.
Well, Gabe, thank you so much for joining me. Is there any last words, and how do we stay in touch with you?
Well, first, thank you so much for having me, Greg. I have a couple of last words. First, shameless self-promotion. You've got to check out my podcast, Inside Mental Health, even if the only one that you listen to is the one that Greg Louganis, you probably know him. He's the host of this show. He's really cool, but it's a great podcast, and it covers all aspects of mental health. It's very, very broad. So if you're interested in learning more about mental health, check out the Inside Mental Health podcast, and you can learn everything that you want to know about me by going to GabeHoward.com. You can get my book anywhere books are sold, but if you buy it at GabeHoward.com, I'll sign it and send you stickers. I mean, what a deal, right? What a deal. Greg, sincerely, thank you for talking about mental health, and thank you for having me on the show.
Sure, my pleasure. And my impression of you is, to me, you're a big teddy bear.
Ah, it's true.
And I love teddy bears.
I am. This means you have to give me a hug. I absolutely want to hug.
You got it. As soon as I see you.
I am pro hugging.
Yes, me too. Well, this is Greg Louganis, and Greg Louganis is alive. So thank you for joining us, and remember to hit like and subscribe so that you can hear the next podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Yay Networks.